Hey, hello everybody. Is the sound all right? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're in chapter 7 and it's a night train. And Mingo Rinpoche is on this night train and he's not having a particularly enjoyable time. It's not first class. Uh, we're all kind of, in a sense, on the train with him, really, because the train journey is a metaphor for our own journey through life, dealing with the ups and downs that we all encounter. And there's things in common. And as he's traveling along in the train, he's experiencing a succession of states of mind, one after the other. Now he's quite aware of this, but there's one state of mind is chasing on the heels of the other. And each particular state of mind arises from a particular emotion, a negative emotion. And the teachings speak of 6 major predominant negative emotions. Uh, I just start. There's pride, jealousy, desire, ignorance, greed, and hatred. Quite a menu. And in the book, he kind of takes the opportunity to kind of reveal the connection between these emotions in our minds and the realm of the realm of experience, the realm that we live, that we inhabit. It, and there's a connection because if if pride is your dominant emotion, your dominant negative emotion, that's associated with being in the God realm. We can explain about this maybe later on, but I'll just go through it just to give you the overall picture. Jealousy puts you into the jealous gods. The problem that the poor jealous gods have is that they're always trying to move up a grade and be with the gods. So they're jealous. The humans are next, and the predominant emotion that clouds the human experience is desire. Stupidity is the characteristic of the animal realm. They don't really join the dots and use reason. So consequently, they're kind of dim. Greed is the preserve of the hungry ghosts, and they're unfortunate creatures. They're greedy. Then whatever they've gotten, they always want more. And in the sacred paintings, they're depicted as these creatures with huge big bellies and very thin little neck, so they can never get enough. And the last but not least are the hell beings, and the emotion that drives their being is anger. Now, Mingo Rinpoche's father pointed out to him, you see, that it is important to remember that, for instance, that hell is a state of mind. It's not a location. All of these realms are states of mind. If you live in anger, it's not that when you die and are reborn that you'll be born in hell. You're actually in hell already. Because if you're just remember the last time you were angry, it's not a nice feeling. And it has lots of consequences. But in summary, I came across something that I was reading recently, and it's simply this. It says that the 6 realms of existence all represent the samsaric mind, and the lack of freedom that is the experience of all ordinary sentient beings. So I want to focus for the moment on this lack of freedom. Because in the book, Mingo Rinpoche, he kind of draws a connection between the lack of freedom, our patterns, habits, and our karma. This is where I'm going to take a little liberty with the book club, in a sense, and introduce a page from another book entirely. This book is written by Namkhai Norbu. He's one of my favorite writers. He has a way of getting really to the point with very sharp, precise language. Obviously, he's a Tibetan man. I think he left Tibet in the end of the 50s or early 60s, and he set up his home in Italy. And he was a university professor in Italy and wrote a number of books. I'm going to read out about a page with your indulgence. I'll read it slowly. Let it kind of seep into you. Don't worry about trying to remember it, because we'll send you out the email with the text. Okay? So you'll have it. If you're interested, you can go back over it and reflect and see what it says to you, you know? So I'll just read it slowly, and then we can have a discussion about it after that. How does that sound? Good, I hope. Yeah, all right. So here goes. Let me see now. It's at this point, it is necessary to have a proper understanding of the concept of karma, because sometimes people interpret it in an imprecise and incomplete way. The fundamental idea of karma is that carrying out a given action has a given effect. A given action will have a given effects. These effects, however, are not irreversible. Karma is not an irrevocable law which cannot be changed. It's not that. For a karma to manifest its effects, appropriate conditions, known as secondary causes, are indispensable. This is where it's getting very interesting now, to the point. When karma is explained, one generally speaks of two principal factors: primary causes and secondary causes. To produce a primary cause, which is potentially capable of having an effect, three things are necessary. There must be intention, the actual action, and then satisfaction. The primary karmic cause formed in such a way is comparable to the seed of a flower, whose development depends on various factors, such as water, fertilizer, the sun, and so on. All of these factors are like the secondary causes, which make up all the different circumstances we encounter in our lives. Thus, being aware of them, it is possible to avoid favoring those which could make the primary karmic cause manifest. Now, for example, if in the past life I committed an action that might result in my being killed in this lifetime, this is the primary cause, which could manifest when the appropriate second cause, such as a quarrel, is present. But if in the moment of quarreling I have the awareness that I am creating negative karma and thus refrain from becoming angry, the other person will probably calm down. And I will have avoided the possibility of being killed. In general, all secondary causes are reflections of primary causes. As the Buddha said, if you want to know what you did in your past life, observe your present condition. If you want to know what your future condition will be, observe your present actions. Any thoughts on that? Or questions?
Morris,
Hmm.
if in the middle of the quarrel you calm down and you change your habits, whatever,
Yes.
and the person who is quarreling with you doesn't, and you get killed, what's happened there?
The primary cause has encountered the appropriate secondary cause, and you get what's due to you.
Okay.
Sooner than you might like.
Okay.
That's maybe if I think about it, I wouldn't have made that answer, but maybe it's not that bad.
Well,
I think it's a good, Morris.
Is there somebody else before yeah? No.
In our life, is it all karma?
Say that again?
Is everything that happens, is it all karma? Like all of it?
Yes, nothing arises without its causes. And generally speaking, if you have good, joyous things in your life, or when you meet them, it's because you created good karma in the past. And if we encounter suffering and things we don't like, equally, it's because we put negative karma in place in the past.
But I think you'd have, just to add in a little thing, and that is because this is our kind of specialist subject, is that the nature of mind itself does not experience karma.
That's correct.
The nature of mind itself is always free. It's not conditioned, and it's not subject to cause and effect. For a more complete answer, Luna.
I think it makes more sense too if you accept that you may have lived previous lives just rationally, that to accommodate that this, I think it would be easier to accept if you have lived previous lives.
Yeah. I don't even think it works if you confine it to one life. I think
No.
yeah. But you see, there's this statement made in chapter 7, then you see it says that our future is influenced but not determined or destined by past conditioning. You see, it's a very important point that karma is not destiny. And you see, when you look at it with the help of this idea of primary and secondary causes, okay, I've done things in the past and I have laid down primary causes, and they will ripen when the time comes, when they meet the circumstances. But what I have control over is how I react when that happens.
Can I say something, please?
Please.
Yeah, I just want, I'm going to be really honest here and say I'm really having difficulty accepting this,
Okay.
although I do know that there is truth in it. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. But the difficulty I have is that when I hear you say these things, I can accept it as an adult with choice of how I, react. But what about children who are murdered, or, people who haven't got the wherewithal to do things different?
That was one of the things I was going to add into what Morris was saying, is that, he says, in terms of the secondary circumstances, that it's possible to have a choice, but most people don't have a choice. Most people do not have a choice, as we know ourselves from our own experience. The habit, the reaction just comes forward. That's why we have to practice, see. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is actually changing, as Cecily was saying earlier, changing how we see the world.
But it's quite here's the thing. It's really good karma to come across these teachings, because you're a lot closer to having choice. One is about determining one's future when one has an understanding of karma. At least
Otherwise, it's the other person's fault.
Mm.
It's the fault of the circumstance. It's the fault of the situation.
There's a nice line here, and I think Martin might have a little bit to add in this as well. It says, until we learn how to examine our minds and direct our behavior, our karmic tendencies, and you could put in our habits there instead of that word, will compel habits to recede themselves, to renew themselves, to repeat themselves.
Morris, I think when you were reading as well, you said the primary cause to give rise to karma, there must be intention, action, and satisfaction.
Satisfaction, yes.
So does that kind of answer some way? The idea that, to me anyway, that reads like I must know that what I'm doing isn't okay, and I do it, and afterwards I'm not particularly remorseful. That makes?
Yeah, I mean.
So somebody who doesn't have capacity for one reason or another, they don't make the same karma.
The karma is not as intense.
Mm.
And likewise, the same action might result in very different karmic consequences depending on the motivation that inspires the action.
Mm. Yeah.
If that's
Thanks.
not, yeah, that's a good question, right? Thanks for that.
I think to mention as well what Bridget was asking about, and to reflect, like Mary mentioned, it's good to kind of have an understanding about previous lives. But there's no logic to this. Like bad things happen to good people. But it's from previous situations. Martin's looking puzzled. I'm not expressing myself very clearly, but it's very difficult. What can happen isn't clear to us. because we don't necessarily see what has happened before. But what Martin has said as well, he talked, and I've mentioned it about our reactions. Our reactions continue. Karma essentially is action or reaction. How we act then continues that karma. So somebody who hasn't had the good fortune to receive these teachings or to hear them, or it's too easy. Like as I was explaining, somebody else, you begin to understand their habits of mind, their states of mind, or what are compelling them to react in a particular way. So that's why having the space and the familiarity with practice, it just makes it so much easier to not engage in that kind of way, to see and understand. There's something in that quote, Morris, about determine your actions. Is it? Mingyur Rinpoche. And it's difficult even here to think in terms of, oh, if I do this, then I will do that. It's difficult to put a stepwise kind of thing in it. But most definitely examining your mind and seeing and beginning to notice, taking that reflective stance towards experience, you begin to notice where you're coming from and what your intention is. And like there's like an aha moment, like a realization, you don't want to go there. And that realization, that understanding, experience and realization makes it far more likely that you will pursue a more beneficial way of being. You'll see things differently.
I find, oh, sorry, Cecily, what are you going to say?
Just to say that that's kind of knowing in your being. It's like a knowing in your being. It doesn't have all the logic or the decisions or the steps and all that necessarily involved in it, but you know that that's not how you want to be. And with practice, you find how you really want to be, you know, that compassionate energy. Sorry, Laura, yeah.
No, that brings me on to how I find that he goes on to be very, give you a sense of the freedom of all of this and be very practical and helpful in that, you know, he says every moment provides a chance to wake up and relate to old patterns in new ways. But that only comes from being able to examine your mind. And I love the way he goes on to show that it's the training that we're actually doing, that sort of resting and that seeing the space in between thoughts, between breaths, that really opens it up for us into what we can do now without too much thinking of it all. And I really like the way he used an example of another way of relating with our habits that we fixate on and restrict the way we perceive our lives, is instead of saying, this is who I am, he says we could say, this is how I sometimes feel. And I think that really brings it all the dialogue into something very immediate and helpful. And liberating, freeing, really.
I'd like to ask a question, Morris.
Okay.
And it's following on, I think, I can't remember who said it, but it's one of the ladies. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. And you talked about the primary causes and you mentioned the word satisfaction. And I wanted to explore it in relation to gossip and gossiping and the absolute, you know, sometimes it's gossiping, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's unkind,
Mm.
and sometimes you just do it because it's your habit.
Mm.
But I wanted to ask, is there an element, is that related to this primary cause of satisfaction? Because afterwards you think, not again. Sorry, does that question make any sense?
Well, it does. You know, the whole idea of satisfaction is sometimes when you react and instinctively, and you can feel dreadful after it, you know. If I think myself, if that feeds into a bit of a resolve not to fall into the same habit again, it weakens the karmic effect of the first action. But I don't think there's much point in doing it and feeling kind of regretful and doing it again and feeling regret. Like at some point, there's a kind of a decision to do one's best, but that's all one can do, you know.
It's kind of this, in truth, this element of sitting on the fence, and then sometimes you just, it's like a sweetie, can't resist. And so that was why the word satisfaction struck a note, to try and get off the fence and try and move forward, because, you know, it's important to own your actions, see what's going wrong, know that you keep falling into the hole, and then I think talking it out helps say it, and maybe reflection will help improve the response. So that was my contribution. Thank you.
Initially, you know, when the Buddha taught his followers, and they kind of discuss these things, it resulted in a whole system of rules and regulations. You see, because if people don't have the understanding and the interest to kind of unravel it all, that's why you need rules and regulations, you know. But as people became more educated and more sophisticated, awareness of matters and the awareness of the likely consequences, like Cecily said, has a kind of an inherent capacity to modify our behavior a bit. But we still have to be very mindful and careful, vigilant about how we act with our body, speech, and mind, you know.
What really helped me, Maurice and Catherine, in relation to the gossip kind of thing, is to have that feeling of revulsion, you know. Oh, to know the consequences are kind of gross. It's very juicy, very attractive, but actually it has an insidious underbelly kind of thing that you know is going to pull you into what you what you honestly now see and don't want to get involved in. Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to be discussing this years ago, and I think Martin used to always say, you see, that all negative actions, not just gossip, have this kind of veneer of attractiveness, of sweetness about them.
There's a phrase that comes to mind. A phrase that comes to mind: pigs in shit. Have you seen pigs in shit? They're so delighted. They love it, right? And so the next thing I'm going to say is that the one thing you can see, you know this, the one thing that you can rely on, the one yardstick, is having a good heart. And having a good heart, it takes care of so much crap. And that's why we're going to move on now and do a Tonglen practice. Did you like that seamless What were they called? Segways, Cecily.
I was going to say that having a good heart isn't something that you need to search for. You already have it, you know, it's already there. That's what familiarity really helps with. Yeah. But all the other practices like the relative practices really do help because you're working with mind and finding a different way of seeing. Everything that you can do in that way really helps. So we'll hand over to you, Irene, please.